Positive thinking can be really hard, but it can also be really easy if you understand these things. If you implement some of the things that I'm about to talk about consistently, they are guaranteed to help shift you from a negative thinking or a negative mindset to a positive mindset. Or even when those negative thoughts pop up, they are going to help you diffuse yourself, detach yourself from them a lot more easier. The things that you're going to learn in this video are probably going to be an invaluable skill, so let's get into it. Welcome to the Liz Does Life channel. If you're listening to the podcast, I am your host, Liz McInnes. Chances are, if you've clicked on this video, you're either really going through it or you're just wanting to become a more positive person, whether you think like you have a long way to go or you feel like you're already there. This video is going to benefit you. Here are the timestamps of the topics that we're going to be talking about in this video. There is quite a bit to get through. This has been a very close topic to me that I have been intentionally working through for the past 3 to 4 years. Because I've worked so heavily on it, I've noticed a massive change, and I'm so excited to give these tips and advice to you that, to be honest, isn't really talked about enough, or I feel like is overlooked in the self-help community. First, starting with why it seems so easy for us to be negative over being positive. Biologically, our brains are hardwired for us to think negatively compared to thinking positively. It's a thing called our negative bias, which means it is far more easier for our brains to automatically go to negative thinking of the worst case scenario than it is to think of the positive or like best case scenario. And that is because it is in a way a survival mechanism that our ancestors took upon to survive. So if we thought of all the negative scenarios, negative what ifs, it made sure that we were prepared for the worst case scenario, and that way we could survive. Thinking of the worst case scenario today is not so much weighted on life or death, it's more so weighted on avoiding an emotional or avoiding an uncomfortable experience. Now the thing about our brains is that she has a different goal to us. Brain doesn't care about you being happy, your brain cares about you surviving. She's not really concerned about you living your best life. She just wants you to survive. So because we know that you and your brain have separate main goals, that's where the clash kind of happens. You're just like, why is it so hard? You're beating yourself up. Why can't I just think positively? It's because your brain and yourself have separate goals. And negative thinking can also be picked up on when you're growing up. If you were constantly around people who were really pessimistic or just like really negative, then it's understandable that majority of your internal monologue is going to be negative, because that's what you learned and that's what you thought was the standard. So a piece of advice is, if you can't change the people that you can hang around, change the people that you follow, change the type of content that you consume. Because let's be realistic, if you're watching this video, you probably spend like multiple hours online. So make sure that whatever content you're consuming is to benefit you or to make you feel the way you want to feel. And the third reason why it can be so hard to think positively is that there's a strong emotion left over from an experience. So it could be there's this residue of anger left over from an experience or where you felt you were wronged, and that's popping up in the form of negative thoughts or just being like really pissed off for some reason. And the next piece is, I feel like this isn't talked about enough, especially in self-help books and especially in self-help podcasts or just like in the self-help community. Going from a negative mindset to a positive mindset isn't going to happen in 3 months. It's probably not going to happen in a year, and it's probably not going to happen in 2 years, and that is okay. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. I think we really forget that even though we see all amazing transformations in like a really short time span, what's going to happen on a biological level is pretty intense, and the amount of time and the amount of experiences that back up that negative way of thinking isn't going to be suddenly erased in a year or 3 months, and that is okay. And it's also really important to remind yourself the years of confirming that negative way of thinking, because you've only been thinking negatively, therefore you've only been looking for negative experiences to back up your beliefs, and why it's probably going to seem a lot more harder to look for positive experience to back up your new positive beliefs, because you've just been programmed for like 10-15 years just to think negatively. It's kind of like for your entire life, you've only spoken one language, you've only written in one language, and then now you're learning an entire new language. When you expect yourself to go from negative thinking to positive thinking, it's kind of like you're expecting someone who's only spoken one language their entire life to automatically pick up a new language. Once you're like, girl, it's going to take a while, and that's okay. And the same goes for negative thinking to positive thinking. It's going to take a while. Just because it's taking a while doesn't mean you're not making any growth. Just because it's taking a while doesn't mean you're not changing. And the main focus with going from a negative mindset to a positive mindset shouldn't be, I'm not there yet. It should be, how have I improved today? Even if it is 1 out of 10 or 20 of my thoughts were positive. Change is still change, and that is going to compound over time. And I know that may seem really hard to hear right now, that you're just like, I just want to be in a positive mindset. I just want to think positive thoughts automatically. I don't want to constantly have to be in conflict with myself. Because yes, thinking negatively, being in a shitty headspace, yeah, it's shit, and that's okay. Key thing to remind yourself in this time is that any change is still change, and that change is going to help you to get where you want to go. Now, you might have noticed in thinking positive thoughts, you're like, I still feel like shit. That is okay, because we know that your thoughts and your feelings are linked. So you think the way you feel and you feel the way you think, which is why, again, it seems so hard to think positively. And I feel like the attention or the acknowledgement of how hard it is to go from negative thinking to positive thinking is really overlooked. And because it's overlooked, it's kind of seen as easy or thing overnight. Oh yeah, you do it for 10 minutes every day and then it just magically happens. It's okay if you've been on this journey for 5 years. And as you're starting to think more positively, you're going to be releasing new types of chemicals in your body. Now, your body has become used to and built a comfort zone of certain chemicals. The chemicals that happen when you think negatively, the chemicals that happen when you're not really excited, when you're not really grateful, those type of chemicals. And now that you're releasing these new ones of gratitude, joy, peace, your body's like, girl, what's going on? This is not what we're used to. This is outside of our comfort zone. This feels unsafe because it's new. And that can show up as in feeling really uncomfortable or feeling really unsafe when you start to think positively. Like, I noticed it for sure when I started to be really intentional about my thinking. I felt so unsafe and so uncomfortable inside my head. It was just a really weird feeling. And I'm here to tell you that it is okay and it is normal to feel like that when you first start to, or even when you've gone through like a really negative spiral and you're just coming out of it and it feels really uncomfortable and really unsafe to be thinking positive thoughts, being really intentional with your thinking. That's okay. It's kind of like your body is steering you in an opposite direction as to where you want to go. You gotta keep reminding it what direction you want to go. And eventually over time, this new norm of being in a state of joy, being in a state of peace, being in a state of gratitude will become the new normal and will become the new comfort zone. Now into things that you can physically do to help journey going from negative thinking into positive thinking. One way you can go about it, pulling yourself up on your negative thoughts instead of having an internal argument with yourself. Instead, learn to detach yourself from your thoughts. I can make an entire new episode or an entire new video on this because the amount of things that I have learned, oh my gosh. You can even do this when you're waiting for things or literally when you're on the toilet, imagining the thought that I'm having or negative thoughts, positive thoughts, any thoughts that you're having, imagine them, you're watching a stream and those thoughts are on a leaf and you're just watching them go past. And that is going to help you build the ability to detach yourself from your thoughts. And that's also going to help you not get in like an internal conflict with yourself, because when you're in conflict with yourself, it is a lot more easier to think negatively than it is to think positively. Another thing that can help you detach from your thoughts or diffuse, which is a term used in acceptance commitment therapy that Dr. Russ talks about in the Confidence Gap book. He's also the author of The Happiness Trap, which I'm reading the confidence book right now, and it is incredible. Like, highly recommend if you're wanting to really work on going from negative thinking to positive thinking, or just wanting to become more confident and have more self-belief, or just be more present in your life. Highly recommend the book. Anyways, he talks about ways that you can diffuse yourself from your thoughts, which is basically like unhooking yourself from those thoughts. Imagine this thought, okay, whatever type of thought that usually pops up, really triggers you, that really sends you down to a spiral. Think of it, so let's say it's the thought, I'm not worthy. Visualize it, change the font of that phrase, change the fonts around, and then maybe change the coloring of each word. Maybe kind of imagine it going up and down in your head. And what this does, it helps you detach its meaning, because the more that you play around with this, the more you kind of realize that it's literally just letters, and those letters are words, and those words have no meaning unless you let them have a meaning. And then another method that you can do is to kind of say the phrase, like let's say it's, for example, I'm not worthy, but say it in, I don't know, David Attenborough's voice or Kourtney Kardashian's voice. Just say it in a voice that's different to yours, because when it comes from a person, not you, again, it doesn't have as much weight on you because it's coming from something outside of you that you can be like, do I want to believe this? No, I don't. It just becomes a lot more easier to detach yourself from it because it's not coming from you. Then another way that you can diffuse yourself from your thoughts is also identifying them. So whenever you notice you are having really self-critical thoughts, be like, aha, or I'm noticing I'm having the thoughts of being self-critical. When you acknowledge the thought, you step out from experiencing it to observing it, which I found really helped me detach myself from those thoughts and therefore be less likely to go down a negative spiral and be more present. Then another way can be thanking your brain and acknowledging it. So think of the repeating thoughts that you have. So it might be being self-critical or comparison or worst case scenario. Make a list for yourself of the key types of negative thoughts that you have. Have that as your criteria. So any thoughts that come up, notice I'm having a self-critical thought, or notice I'm having a thought of jealousy, because you can identify and put it in a section. It's not like that thought is you, because it's just like, oh, you go over there, you're not me. A key thing to avoid when you start to notice you're having negative thoughts is to avoid being self-critical, because these self-critical thoughts or these self-judgmental thoughts, they're kind of like bullies disguised as cheerleaders. We think that being self-critical or being mean to ourselves or judging ourselves is gonna like feed us into thinking positively. It's not. If being self-critical and being mean to ourselves did actually help us be positive, why wouldn't we all be in a positive headspace? Because it doesn't work like that. The best way to help yourself go into a positive thinking is to detach yourself from those thoughts and don't judge yourself for having them. Understand that this neural pathway of thinking negatively, she is really strong. She's got like 10, 15 years, 4 years, whatever, how long. She has been reconfirmed for years and years. So therefore, physiologically, your brain's not really on your side. However, with constant awareness, understanding that again, your brain and you have separate goals, and that's okay. It's going to be a lot more easier for you to detach yourself from them. And like I said at the start, the content that you consume is going to massively influence the way of thinking. So here are some books that I would highly recommend that you read or listen to without sounding cliche or just like really generic. Will probably change your life, because they're the kind of books that you can read again and again, and each time that you read them you take something different from them, and each time that you read them you implement something that is going to redirect yourself into where you want to be going, how you want your life to look like. Okay, first book is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. This, oh my god, I can guarantee that after reading that book, you will not be the same person as to where you started, and I mean that in the best way possible. You will absolutely be so much more closer to the person that you want to become after reading that book. The next book is Confidence Gap by Dr. Russ Harris, and it directly speaks to what we're talking about. And then in terms of podcasts, I would highly recommend Big Conversations by Haley Hoffman Smith. It's more on the spiritual side, but the way she is so articulative with her words and the way she has such an optimistic approach to everything is chef's kiss. And then Do You Fucking Mind by Alexa. Her podcast is very much grounded in neuroscience, and it's also very much more practical. Both can definitely benefit you, and I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you got value out of this video, be sure to subscribe or follow me depending where you're listening, on Spotify or on YouTube. I would greatly appreciate it, and I will see you next time.